Number 10. Superman and Wonder Woman. Some people love this pairing, some people prefer Diana with Batman, some people would rather she was with Steve Trevor, and then there are some of us, like myself, who just think Diana is a strong woman who don't need no man. Superman with Wonder Woman, however, is admittedly not that weird. Both are powerful heroes who respect and care for one another, so what's so wrong with them hooking up and having a relationship? We've seen alternate realities and Elseworld stories where this has worked. Heck, they've even had children together. The moment when DC overstepped, though, it seems, with these two and made it kinda weird, was when they made their relationship a permanent fixture of the New 52 main continuity, which honestly just made it kinda strange. Especially when we then were forced to watch them get intimate and talk dirty just about everywhere and almost all the time, because I guess they're both just that invincible and super, and I guess horny? I don't know. Not something we really needed to see, was it? Number 9. Batman and Black Canary. These two are definitely an odd pairing, but of course not the weirdest on the list, more just an unusual ship. They have hooked up plenty in the all-star Batman and Robin comic book universe, but if you're one of those people that prefers to claim that alternate realities don't count, there's still a lot of weird romantic moments we've had from the original Justice League of America days. Now technically this is all considered Earth 1 now, but these issues came out in the late 60s, early 70s, before Earth 1 was really established as, well, being Earth 1. And anyways, call me crazy, but I consider Earth 1 to be pretty close to the main continuity simply because, I mean, it was the main continuity before it was retconned into an alternate reality following Crisis. Anyways, over on Earth 1, back in Justice League of America issue 88, we got a weird love triangle moment featuring Black Canary, who was stuck choosing randomly between Batman and Green Arrow after sharing a passionate kiss previously with the Bats. So the relationship technically goes way back. So far back that it's part of the now alternate reality that was once main continuity pre-Crisis. Number 8. Arsenal and Cheshire. This was a weird one before the New 52, but even after it still stayed as a pretty bizarre relationship that some writers just still love to ship. Arsenal is Roy Harper, originally known as Green Arrow's ward and sidekick Speedy. He was Speedy before Mia Dearden took over. Roy has a pretty weird and deadly relationship on and off with villain and assassin Cheshire. Despite being terrible for one another, however, these two even at one point had a child together, and oddly enough it became the best part of their relationship. Roy's relationship with his daughter Leanne was one of arguably the only good things to come out of this weird romance with Cheshire. However, before New 52 happened, Leanne died, and we got a very strange moment where Roy and Cheshire started blaming one another for the tragedy, and then that fight escalated to a passionate moment between the two. Not a thing usually in real life, by the way. And Roy both wanted to sleep with Cheshire following the loss of their daughter, while also finding it difficult to get intimate due to his intense sadness. We also got a weird moment later on when Cheshire tried to use the death of their daughter to guilt trip Roy into helping her, implying he owed her because their daughter died while in his care. This is some intense and weird stuff. Number 7. Lois Lane and Jonathan Carroll. The fact that this relationship happened I guess made sense, since this is when Lois and Superman's marriage was basically erased in the New 52, but it still was a strange pairing. Superman ended up with Wonder Woman, which was also kinda weird to be honest, though a lot of fans did enjoy that pairing. But Lois got stuck with Jonathan Carroll. Now who is Jonathan? Well, he's basically an obnoxious and forgettable character who at one point also showed up on panel without his nipples. Where did he leave those nipples? I don't know. Their romance only lasted a few issues and ended with Lois erasing some of his memories before leaving him, because I guess she didn't want him calling her ever again. Forget my number, but literally. Number 6. Harley Quinn and the Joker. So these two aren't really a weird romance in terms of understanding just why or how they got together. They're more of a weird romance in the fact that so many people still ship them today, years after they've broken up and after it's really been established that their relationship was extremely toxic for both of them. Now these two really don't belong together. Of course, unless we're talking about some kind of magical alternate reality like White Knight, which features a reformed version of the Joker, Jack Napier, who only seeks to redeem himself and basically takes on the role of hero once he regains his sanity, continuing to work on his mental health. But we're not talking about that version of their relationship, are we? Even villains don't deserve a relationship as toxic as Harley Quinn and the Joker's typically is. Their relationship is not only toxic, it's and destructive. Still, the world keeps turning and plenty of fans still to this day keep shipping these two and hoping we'll see Harley return to the Joker's side once more. I'm not trying to ship shame, but I just personally find the love for this relationship shocking and confusing considering present continuity. But hey, people gonna ship. Number 5. Huntress and Robin. This relationship comes to us from Earth number 2, where Huntress is actually the daughter of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, as opposed to the more common Huntress that we've come to know as Helena Bertinelli. Bertinelli actually also has had a relationship with Dick Grayson, though admittedly a much less weird one. On Earth 2, Robin and Helena Wayne Huntress are therefore kind of like brother and sister, as both sort of grew up together under the guidance of Bruce, which makes all the flirting and tension between them super awkward. At one point, Dick only makes it more awkward when he acknowledges that he remembers helping to change Helena when she was just a baby. He also at one point breaks into her apartment when she's moved out of the Wayne Manor. Dick surprises Helena with his presence when she emerges from the shower, waiting for her in her apartment. Number 4. Superman and Supergirl. We've actually seen these two get married in the comics, although it was a strange sight. At least those two versions of our heroes were not related. Linda Danvers tied the knot with Silver Age Superman, and Linda Danvers, while Supergirl, was not actually Superman's cousin at all. Kind of a different thing. She's not Kara. Her story was a lot more complex than Kara's was. Linda and Kal-El would even have a child together, Ariella Kent. But although this doesn't seem as weird when given the context, it was also once implied in Action Comics issue number 289 that if Superman could marry anyone, he'd want to marry his cousin Supergirl. At least that's what Superman said when Kara revealed she had been trying to play matchmaker and find Superman a suitable woman to marry. Kal-El reveals that Supergirl is the only woman suited to marrying him, but of course that they cannot marry because on Krypton, cousins aren't allowed to get married. He does acknowledge though that in some countries of Earth that is allowed. Just what are you suggesting, Superman? Why'd you bring that up? He's like, we can't do it, but you know, here there's some places we could do it technically. Number 3. Captain Marvel and Stargirl. So this doesn't inherently sound that bad. Captain Marvel, or Shazam as we now know him, is really Billy Batson, a teenage boy who Stargirl, a teenage superhero, finds herself interested in. For a time the two date, and Stargirl is obviously interested in Billy, not his adult hero form of Shazam / Captain Marvel. However, not everyone who's part of the Justice Society of America knows that Billy Batson is Captain Marvel, which makes things super awkward. Eventually, Jay Garrick as the Flash ends up bringing up his concerns about the relationship with Captain Marvel, who he believes is a grown man dating a 16-year-old girl. Not willing to reveal the secret of his true identity, Billy decides to break things off with Stargirl and leaves the Justice Society. He breaks up with Stargirl while in his Captain Marvel form too, which kind of just makes this whole thing weirder. Number 2. Supergirl and Comet the Super Horse. One of the weirdest DC romances comes to us from the time Supergirl ended up in a relationship with her horse, Comet. Of course, Comet wasn't really just a horse. He was actually originally a centaur named Byron, who Circe attempted to help turn into a full human. Unfortunately, this went awry and resulted in him actually being turned into a full horse instead, though a horse who possessed telepathy, super strength, and immortality at least. In other words, a super horse. Eventually, Comet met a sorcerer who could help to reverse some of the spell that made him a full horse, but only some of it. Comet was then granted the ability to turn human whenever a comet passed, and it was during this time that he sought out and pursued a romantic relationship with Supergirl while in his human form, because no matter his appearance, he would always love her. It's so weird. Number 1. Batman and Batgirl. You might think it's strange that I decided to put this point above Supergirl and her super horse, but honestly, I just find it to be an even more strange ship than that previous one. Even if we're talking outside of the animated Killing Joke film, which literally allowed us to see these two get intimate on screen, well, I mean almost. We obviously cut away from the actual deed, because you know, there's kids watching and such. We also saw Barbara Gordon, daughter of Commissioner Gordon, Batman's good friend, and Bruce Wayne himself get shipped together really awkwardly in a comic based on the animated Batman Beyond series. In this comic, it's revealed that not only did Barbara and Bruce have an intimate relationship, well, basically Dick was absent, but we also learned that Bruce got her pregnant as well. Yikes. Why did this have to bleed into other things? Why did this have to be a thing at all?
Kicking off the list at number 10, Christine Everhart. We start in Iron Man 1, released back in 2008. The film that kicked off the MCU pretty much. We have Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, having a great time in Vegas, as most billionaires do. After being approached by Christine Everhart after winning his Apogee Award, she conducts an on-the-spot interview with Stark, asking about the nicknames that have come to light during his military weapon deals. Nicknames like Merchant of Death or the Da Vinci of our time. Stark responds in his usual confident, cocky manner, and at one point in the conversation, Christine asks him if he ever loses an hour of sleep while accumulating his riches. He responds with, "I'd be prepared to lose a few with you." And it works! This reporter ends up sleeping over at the Stark Malibu mansion and is greeted by Tony's future wife, Pepper Potts, where she refers to her as trash. Now, of course, the scene is to set the character for Stark, but Christine still wants to take him down. She's the only one left sitting after Tony announces that he is Iron Man at the end of the film. Number 9, Juggernaut and She-Hulk. Say what? Okay, this one's pretty interesting. So what happens when you get a super lawyer and a super criminal? Well, you get a night of romance for some reason. Uncanny X-Men issue 435. We see Juggernaut and he just kicks Rhino's ass. And then he has the perfect opportunity to escape the holding cell that he's currently held in. So Jen Walters, aka She-Hulk, asks him the pressing questions. Why the change of heart, Kane? You're a criminal. Why didn't you just leave? She thinks it's part of this master plan, this act of kindness, saving the guard from Rhino, and then willingly being detained again. She thinks it's a scam, rightfully so. So they start to talk about baseball a bit, getting all casual, and then the final question. Jen goes, "What do you think about women's rights?" He smiles, she smiles, and then we get this glorious next shot. The shot where they're in bed, like the wall is broken, the nightstand's just on the ground, the lamp's messed up. The place has gone to shit. And the craziest part about all this, the windows are just wide open. I mean, this whole thing ended up retconned so that She-Hulk was a doppelganger from an alternate Earth, but this is still pretty weird. Number 8, Black Widow and Spider-Man. We go now to Marvel Team Up issue 82, Spider-Man and the Black Widow. Now, at this point, Nancy Rushman has entered the chat. Black Widow looks like Black Widow, but inside here, it's actually Nancy Rushman, school teacher from upstate New York. Got it? Yep. Cool. The issue begins with Nancy outside when a couple of New York punks, try and steal her bag. Spider-Man, of course, swings in and saves the day. Mostly he starts the thugs off, and then Nancy delivers the final blow, saving Spider-Man back. Nice. He sees the Black Widow suit in her bag, but she doesn't even know what he's talking about. She is fully convinced that she is a school teacher and not, in fact, Black Widow. Spider-Man's like, "No, you just took that guy out. You're for sure Black Widow. Look at the suit." But still, nothing. So, Spider-Man offers her the suit of the Black Widow, to Nancy Rushman, and attempts to keep her warm, maybe bring some memories back in her head, find out what's going on. So Spider-Man sees her in the outfit and comments on how nice she looks. Real nice. So she gets the outfit on, and it of course fits perfectly. But this doesn't jog her memory. Despite how good the suit may feel, the memories just aren't coming back. And then in comes the S.H.I.E.L.D. strike force with the plans to shoot Black Widow, Spider-Man even getting grazed by a bullet in the process. Just then there's a moment where Nancy's body acts by itself almost, and then she lunges forward and strikes the strike force member and takes him down with ease. She's of course still confused, and they end up sticking together for a bit, and then in issue 84, Nancy goes in for the kiss, and Spider-Man has no idea what to do. He likes Widow, but this Widow lookalike doesn't act like her, so it's a weird thing, and in Spider-Man's words, these are the wrong feelings in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah, you could definitely say that again. She ended up getting her memory back, and the real Black Widow wasn't as into the web slinger as he hoped for. Poor Peter Parker. Number 7, Deathpool. Deadpool's on this list, of course, and it's for good reason. One of the crazy relationships that he's been in was one with death. Now, with Deadpool dying as often as he does, he of course has seen the face of death, and he's a fan. In Deadpool The End, we find Deadpool finally getting close to death, long term. Finally. Even when Mephisto pipes in, Deadpool responds with, "Can at dollar store Devilman Crybaby. I've been angling this hookup for like a century to get here." And the top priority for Wade? To get to the ever-lovin' after ever-livin' Nookie. While Thanos is normally the one who's been Death's boy toy, it's nice to see a comic where Wade finally gets that relationship. And it's super hilarious and of course, super sexual. A lot of innuendos in that one, check it out. Number 6, Iron Man. The stud has for sure had a few hookups in his day, but one of the most wild one-night stands has to be from Iron Man 3. We start the movie in a flashback to New Year's Eve of 1999. We have Tony, again before he's a superhero, so he's just super rich and cocky, and of course uses those skills to persuade the scientist, Maya Hansen. Stark actually bailed on his meeting with Aldrich Killian for this night with Hansen, and of course Killian's character arc began this night being upset at Tony for giving him the cold shoulder. The next morning, Maya wakes up to no Tony beside her, rather a note. And those two ended up being the masterminds behind Project Extremis, which of course caused a lot of trouble. And it all came down to that one fateful New Year's Eve back in 1999. Not a good call. Not a good call, Tony. Number 5, Howard the Duck. Our boy Howard the Duck was in the final lineup for Avengers Endgame. Check it out. So of course I gotta talk about his love life too. In one scene in the movie Howard the Duck, Howard gets close to the singer Beverly Switzer, like in bed close. Real close. Now we might not see this exact scene in future Marvel movies. I mean, I hope we do. Could you imagine if they did? I mean, it's one thing for two soups to jump in the sack, but Howard the Duck, he's a duck. Too weird for me and my friends, too weird. I don't know about this one. But if you want to see what Howard the Duck is all about in full force, for sure watch his movie. It's a classic 80s flick. It just got the whole 80s thing. Got Michael J. Fox in there. It's great. And also the practical effects for Howard the Duck make this cute scene extra creepy. It just doesn't look very comforting. And number 4, Spider-Man and Black Cat. Peter Parker, of course, is the web-slinging friendly neighborhood hero and does what he can do to keep the people of New York safe. The little people. But underneath all of that, he's still just a young dude. And it's one thing to have a recurring villain, somebody that matches the hero's abilities, you know? Usually the villain will end up having a similar story, so that the hero and villain relationship is kind of even, right? So when it comes to Black Cat, she of course has been caught by Spider-Man many times, being a cat burglar and him being Spider-Man. They will definitely jump into each other. They have this weird relationship, but it's super interesting. Like, he's a hero, she's a criminal. I'm actually still waiting to see a proper Black Cat Spider-Man dynamic on the big screen. They're close. They're very close to getting him. He even told her his real name. So Black Cat, aka Felicia, was a cat burglar just like her dad. But after she dates Spider-Man, she starts to become the good guy, and it's awesome. She's always fascinated me as a character. This relationship, even in Spider-Man PS4, their relationship and how they work together causes some raised eyebrows with MJ. Peter's like, yeah, me and Black Cat are doing this cool DLC mission together. And she's like, oh yeah, cool. Be back before 11. Have fun with Black Cat, the lady who might be the mother of your kid. Also, you might have a kid, so that's neat. Cool, I'm gonna go watch The Goonies on Blu-ray. See ya tomorrow, I guess. God, my life sucks. We were on our way to seeing this relationship form in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we were introduced to Felicia, played by Felicity Jones. In that same movie, Gwen Stacy bit the dust. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 would have set this relationship up so nicely, but it never happened. Bye, Felicia. And number 3, Wolverine. A lot of people overlooked this moment from X-Men Days of Future Past, but it's actually a great example of who Logan is deep down. In Days of Future Past, Logan's mind was sent back in time to 1973. That's a while back, so he can prevent Mystique from killing Trask. Now, the second he wakes up in this past, it's meant to be a comedic moment. He's in a room that's decked out in 70s gear, and he wakes up next to a woman in a waterbed. A waterbed? I don't know how anybody could sleep in those things. Imagine having a few drinks and then laying in a waterbed. Oh my god, I threw up so quick. But he wakes up next to a mobster's daughter. He was being paid to keep her safe, so of course he runs into a bit of trouble, having to kill the mobsters that enter that room because they of course found them both together. Not professional at all, Logan. Not professional at all. Also, if he just kept his distance, those poor mobsters would still be alive. They have families. They probably have bills to pay. And number 2, Peter Quill. Guardians of the Galaxy came out in 2014 and James Gunn made the most fun Marvel movie to date. Still, the most fun Marvel movie ever. The opening of the film, we find Chris Pratt's character, Star-Lord, and as the opening credits roll, we see him walking, well, dancing rather, to find the orb, which ends up being an Infinity Stone. It's a pretty important orb. So he goes in, introduces himself, does the badass fight moves, and then rockets his way out of there. And after he barely escapes in his ship, the Milano, as soon as his ship starts to fly away from danger, out pops an alien woman from below deck. So we briefly meet Berit, and if you don't remember her from the first movie, that's fine, because neither did Star-Lord. In fact, he didn't even remember she was on the ship. I mean, of all the times to have a one-night stand with an alien, right before a big heist, this guy's crazy. Come on, Quill. And finally, number 1. Ant-Man and Beetle. Now, of course, whenever I read issues with Ant-Man now, I see it as Paul Rudd. Naturally, I mean, he's so lovable and charming, of course. Paul Rudd lives rent-free in a lot of our heads. Guaranteed. I think to myself, what would Paul Rudd do at least twice a day? We gotta talk about it more. Paul Rudd was cast to play Ant-Man in his first MCU debut, of course, back in 2015 in Ant-Man. He plays Scott Lang in the movies because I think people aren't really too fond of Hank Pym. Good idea. So when I read the issue with Scott Lang's Ant-Man and Beetle, I was sitting up. I was like, yeah, this is Paul Rudd. They even wrote it in a way where it's like really comedic and the timing between the shots, it's amazing. Heroes and villains hooking up, that should be a show. Screw The Bachelor in Paradise, what is that? I want to see the good and the bad doing the ugly. Every Thursday at 9 p.m, that's when I want to see it. Right before Friday, so we all come in the office and we're like, see who Ant-Man hooked up with? It's like, yeah dude, awesome, unreal. I want it. In Ant-Man Last Days issue 1, we find Scott Lang as he bumps into Beetle at a club. Ant-Man's like, whoa, you tried to kill Iron Man. You're gonna go to the authorities, madam. And she's like, Scott, relax, that was like 3 weeks ago. Hashtag old news. So they start talking, Scott buys her a drink, and then Scott tells her something Cap said. If you want to be an Avenger, you do not sleep with supervillains. And then this is the next page showing Ant-Man just sitting in boxers in bed with Beetle, with the line, I'm so sorry, Captain America, which I can just hear in Paul Rudd's voice. Like it's so funny. And also his damn helmet is still on. He just looks so silly. He's got like a 12 pack and he's just sitting there with his helmet and he's like, oh, what a crazy night. And then Beetle wakes up and says, oh, you're still here? That's weird. Weird is the perfect word for it, Beetle. Number 10, Mystique and Deadpool. Deadpool gets around, and so does Mystique, in fact. So it's only fair to assume that the two ended up crossing paths at some point. In holy matrimony even? Maybe. So in Deadpool number 27, titled The Wedding of Deadpool, we find out that Mystique and Wade were married. That would be the best wedding of all time. Well, the love wasn't true or strong enough to last, as shortly after he asked her to sign the divorce papers. He's also been married quite a bit, so this isn't his first divorce rodeo, that's for sure. So why didn't the couple work out? Well, Mystique, being Mystique, was actually just using Wade, sort of like a way into Weapon X so she can steal some files. Classic Mystique move. The issue itself is quite enjoyable and funny. We even see Wade visit the lovely Niagara Falls. Maybe he goes over in a barrel, I'll never tell. Number 9, Winter Soldier and Black Widow. This is one that audience members have talked about seeing for a while on the big screen, like they want this. If the MCU had worked so that Bucky and the Avengers got more time to hang out, this might have ended up happening. I could see it. I think there's more to Natasha and Bucky, because in the comics, Bucky trains Nat in the Red Room. And then in the MCU, Natasha talks to Steve about the Winter Soldier and how she's tried to stop him before. So she knows about his existence in that universe, just how much we don't really know yet. But with Black Widow being a prequel to Iron Man 2, I feel like we're gonna see some sort of flashbacks or something that involves Bucky. I think it's going to be full of cameos. Natasha was given this serum in her origins, of course, and I hope they include this in the movie where she ages slower. So her and Bucky are around the same age in the comics, funny enough. And she knows him as James back in the day, you know, before the Winter Soldier stuff. So could the comic book hookup just be a one-time thing? Or will we see some sort of flirtatious behavior with the two in her solo flick and some saucy flashback scene? Let us know below. Do you want to see this? Is this kind of like a weird thing? I know people want Bucky and Cap to be like a thing. We were all rooting for it, but hey, it's never too late. Number 8, Happy and Pepper. Yeah, I just said that. This one would never happen in the MCU, but just imagining it is pretty hilarious and weird. So yeah, in the comics, they were a thing. There was this sort of love triangle actually that happened going on with Pepper, Tony, and Happy. So once Happy was hired as Tony's new bodyguard, Happy and Pepper started to bicker, kind of argue a little bit, and through that they ended up becoming pretty flirty in nature. Kind of like in high school when somebody makes fun of you, it's because they usually end up liking you a bit in the first place, you know, it's like playful banter. So Pepper and Happy ended up getting married. That is until Happy met his demise in the Civil War storyline. Sads. I honestly feel like Happy and Aunt May are gonna do this whole marriage thing in the MCU. Like this is gonna happen to them. Like by the time that happens, Peter will probably end up running the Avengers. So I'm sure he'll take the spot of Tony when it comes to commenting on the weird relationship between the two. Only I'm sure it will be more lighthearted and fun in nature. Kind of like what we saw with him in Far From Home. Solid dynamic, I'm here for the both of them. Or maybe Spider-Man is gonna get pissed once Happy dies and that's gonna be like his way of like coming back in. Or maybe Aunt May will die, and then he'll be even more pissed. Oh my god, we have a lot of things to work with. Number 7, Nightcrawler and Jermaine. This one is juicy. Imagine you're dating somebody, and then you find out that they're actually an adopted sibling. Like, that's a weird conversation to have. I mean, you're not related, sure, but like, That's still weird. That's a very weird thing to do. That's exactly what happened to Kurt Wagner. Kurt grew up with Jermaine Sardos. He was adopted by her and her mother, and they of course became close, being the new siblings and all. But then things get amazing, okay? So Kurt started to date a woman named Amanda Sefton, okay? And then she turned out to be Jermaine in disguise. Surprise, dude, that's crazy. Now, normally when you find something like this out, you're a little upset. You've been deceived. You're obviously confused, and you're probably pretty angry. I mean, one would assume. But Nightcrawler is totally cool with it. He's like, you know what, I'd be more demonstrative about it, but I don't want to set a bad example for Kitty Pryde. Yeah, or you could respond like that. That's one way you could come back. This dude is not fazed by this at all. He's like, yeah man, I basically have 2 girlfriends. What's up? Number 6, Kitty and Colossus. Age is just a number, I guess. When it comes to Marvel romances, they aren't really the most healthy of romances, you know? When the two first met in X-Men issue 129, she's said to be 13 years old. They're trying to recruit her to go to Professor X's school. Colossus is like 18 at the time, or so we think. Now, in the Days of Future Past storyline beginning in X-Men 141, we see Kitty and Colossus married in the future. Nice, I think. That's another thing though, like back to the 14-year-old part, because that's the craziest point that I'm trying to make here. They had their first kiss during the space mission, and right before they kiss, Kitty is even like, oh, I wish I was older, and Colossus is like, so do I. And then he explains how serious he's being by kissing her. And cue the police, send them in guys, we got him, roll it down, let's go. And then after the kiss, he's like, oh, you're not older, like you should be older. And Kitty's like, it doesn't matter. He's like, no, it for sure does matter. I'm like, yeah, you just kissed though, it kinda, feel like you're already nailing that confident, buddy. Yeah, this isn't the right time or place. More so, time. That's a big time, that 4-letter word. That's the main thing here. Number 5, Wolverine and Squirrel Girl. Yeah, this one's weird. So in part 1 of this list, I had mentioned that Wolverine, when he was with a young Mary Jane Watson, which is just a wild time. If you haven't seen part 1, you gotta go watch it. It has some fun stuff in there. Turns out he has this weird history as well with Squirrel Girl. And this has been speculated for a while now, and it comes down to a simple page of text. In New Avengers issue 7, we see the two talking as if something had happened. Something rather intimate, that is. A little intimate. Squirrel Girl is like, well, I hope we can agree to be professional, you know? And Wolverine's like, of course. You look amazing. And she's like, oh, you do look good too. There's just something there. This is not a conversation, like I don't catch up with my buddies and be like, hey, how's school? Good, you look amazing. You do too. I'm like, yeah, let's be professional. They're like, oh, what? Why wouldn't you? This is a normal thing. This becomes more evident come Wolverine issue 8. Emma Frost had entered Wolverine's mind and literally found a room called Sexual Fantasies. And then Emma's like, I know I'm gonna regret going into this one. And maybe she was right, because upon opening the door, none other than Squirrel Girl herself is hanging out in this room. Proof? I don't know, proof of a weird fling? I think so. Number 4, Wolverine and Storm. Now, whenever Wolverine is in the picture, you know somebody's gonna get hurt, whether it's physically or emotionally. So Storm and Wolverine were always flirtatious. They were the cool kids of the X-Men. They didn't exactly get involved with a lot of the drama. They were too cool for that, you know? Besides, Wolverine was too into Jean Grey anyway, so his hands were full. Now, after a divorce, that's a tricky time to do stuff. Even flirting with a coworker after a divorce, it just looks way worse now more than anything. The timing is just ill. Storm divorced Black Panther and then things got interesting. The two of them ran the Jean Grey school and hit it off. Now, the two of them could have just gone on to become the best of lovers, but Wolverine had to go ahead and die, not giving the relationship the proper light of day. And number 3, Gamora and Iron Man. Now, at the start of Endgame, we see Tony Stark and Nebula stranded in space after the events of Infinity War. The two weirdly got along. I mean, yeah, they both bonded over losing a massive battle that resulted in lots of their family and friends dying, so it's kind of easy to let bygones be bygones, you know? Tony and the daughter of Thanos in one ship playing games, you gotta love it. Now, what if I told you that this isn't the first time Tony has gotten close to one of these mad sisters? Tony and Gamora, believe it or not, have hooked up before. So the panel starts with Gamora being all shy and cool. She has like her drink and she's like, oh, you're gonna have to do better out here. And then Tony responds in his classic Tony Stark manner, I can do better. And then it immediately cuts over to the next page of both of them lying in bed. He's all tucked into the blanket, like the shell head looks like he's shell shocked, to say the least. I think Gamora's chill about it. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna go back to the bar. And Tony's like, all right, cool. And then after she leaves, he lets out a small, ow, which, pretty obvious. Number 2, Scott Summers and Emma Frost. We've all been in class and maybe you see your high school crush on the other side of the room. You start to daydream, maybe you're putting your pencil through your hair, doing all that cute and you start to daydream of talking to them, maybe even dating them. You can't help it, right? All those hormones flying around through your high school head. High school's wild, man, what a weird time. Cyclops loves the telepathic types, so this exact scenario could get him in quite the pickle if he did anything like this, which he did. So after Emma becomes Scott's therapist to say, some things get heated. So she used her telepathic powers to enter Scott's mind to help him get through past traumas, you know? What a good friend. So naturally they get pretty close, maybe a bit too close. The affair happened in their minds, which is why this is one of my favorites on this list. Like Jean Grey walked in on them in their / her minds, all the minds together. Superheroes are insane, man. So Emma Frost pitches the situation pretty well. She's like, no, we'll be in deep private thought where it's safe to explore these feelings without guilt. And he's like, Emma, I'm clearly betraying my wife, come on. Get out of my head. I don't know. I feel like with the psychic stuff, that's like, does it count? Is that cheating? Yeah, that's cheating. If you think about it. I don't know. What a weird loophole. And finally, number 1, WandaVision. Yep, with the new Disney Plus show getting released soon, I have to save this one for last. This one is hot out of the MCU, and I feel like it's a relationship that people overlook. Now, I'm talking about the MCU story with these 2 characters. That's it. These guys should not be together. Like, what? During Civil War, she buries this dude underground when he attacks Hawkeye. Vision also is made out of the Mind Stone mostly, so the same stone that gave Wanda and Pietro their powers in this universe. And maybe that's why they're attracted to each other, but like that's not enough. Like that's the biggest red flag couple. And sure, this last one is just my opinion, but I feel like I'm not alone here. The romance started somewhere between Civil War and Infinity War, but like what we see on the screen isn't enough to make us believe that they're like a solid, happy, healthy couple. It just doesn't make any sense. Kicking off the list at number 10, Kitty Pryde and Pete Wisdom. Scotland is a lovely place to fall in love. So magical, all the fresh air and the mountains makes your brain happy, you know? And that's exactly what happened to Pete Wisdom and Kitty Pryde. They met in Scotland when Black Air assigned them to help Excalibur on a mission, and Kitty at first hated this dude. I mean, he was smoking all the time, he was just a bummer to be around. She didn't trust him at all on top of all of that. So he was just like this mysterious smoking man that she was like, yeah, whatever. So she felt like she had to go on a mission with him, you know, to keep a watch on this guy, see what he's all about. And then of course she sees the soft side and falls in love. But there's of course the age gap, plus she was still hung up on Colossus. I mean, of course, who wouldn't be? The two of them hit it off for a bit anyways. That is until Kitty left to join S.H.I.E.L.D. and then almost cheated on him. Yeah, it got really close, like last minute, it was bad times. She tried keeping it a secret, but people, the truth always comes out and it always goes around. He left even though she begged him not to, so definitely a rough time with them too. And guys, just a reminder before we go to number 9 to go ahead and give us a super thumbs up on this video because it helps us out a lot in the studio. Thank you so much, you guys are the best. Now over to some brother and sister romances. Number 9, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. The twins are pretty close, naturally. I mean, one's a witch, the other has super speed. They're the coolest twins ever. And the two got a little too close though in the Ultimates. Yeah, we're trying to get that out of our brains and our eyes. So sure, this was an alternate universe or whatever, but you can't unsee some of this stuff. In the 3rd issue of the Ultimates, the Wasp is like, oh man, those twins sure do love each other. And Cap's like, why of course they do, they're family, haha. And then she's like, no dude, like he loves her, loves her. And then Cap gives this reaction, and that was a cool moment because you and Captain America both had the same exact face at the same time while you were reading. It's like you're in the book, how lovely. Number 8, Wolverine and MJ. I guess when you run out of people to hook up with on your own team, you gotta branch out a little bit, or branch down in age. So Wolverine and Mystique are the 2 X-Men most likely to try and steal your boo. So in Ultimate Spider-Man issue 66, we see Wolverine at it again. So Wolverine and Spider-Man swapped bodies, you know, kind of like the Change-Up or Freaky Friday. Yeah, Mesmero switched their bodies, so Peter's like, hey, I think you should go to school because school is important, blah, blah, blah. You should do that and I should do this. So while Wolverine was in Peter's body, he at one point ended up kissing MJ. Yeah, and that's not even the end. He even tried to sleep with her. What a creep. What a creep. Yeah, I guess those walks to school were starting to pull on the heartstrings a bit, you know? So Mary Jane told him she wants to wait until they were older for that kind of stuff to happen. So thankfully nothing too crazy happens, but come on, Wolverine, what are you doing? Pick on someone your own age or size, or just don't. Just be single. Go be single forever. Number 7, Magneto and the Wasp. Okay, in the original Secret Wars 3, the pair actually have a one-night stand. And she even said that Magneto is a great kisser, so what do you know? A few of you are watching like, I knew that, who didn't know that? Of course. So here's the kicker, Magneto was apparently drugged. Yeah, it was revealed from Jim Shooter, the guy who wrote the series. He said that Magneto was accidentally drugged during all of this. So he was extra lovey-dovey with Janet at this point. So Magneto was head over heels for her, but the Wasp on the other hand was like, yeah dude, that was a one-time thing, one-O-N-E. And it's wild too, because like Janet says no 3 times. And then she's like, oh, well, I suppose, I mean, you do have the iciest blue eyes I've ever seen. Number 6, Mystique and Deadpool. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about Mystique getting around a lot with the team. Deadpool though, whew, not that different after all. So it was only bound to happen where the two of them crossed paths. In holy matrimony, that is. Yeah, so in Deadpool number 27, simply titled The Wedding of Deadpool, we find out that Mystique and Wade are married, or were married. That would be the best wedding of all time, by the way. That was open bar. Whew. So while the love wasn't true or strong enough to last, it was still one that had us all sitting up and loving. And it didn't take long for him to ask her to sign the divorce papers. He's also been married quite a few times, so this wasn't, you know, a first. He probably had a few extra pieces of paper lying around. He's like, yeah, here's one. So why didn't the couple work out, you ask? Well, Mystique was actually just using Wade as a way into Weapon X so she can get her hands on some files. Classic. The issue itself is quite enjoyable. We even see Wade visit our very own Niagara Falls. And yes, maybe he gets a bit too close. Number 5, Nightcrawler and Jermaine Sardos. I can't not include this one, okay? So imagine right now, you're dating somebody and then you find out that they're actually your adopted sister this entire time. Yeah, that's exactly what happened to Kurt Wagner. This is the best. So Kurt grew up with Jermaine Sardos, right? He was adopted by her and her mother. And they of course became close, as most siblings do, you know, being new siblings if anything. But then things get amazing. So Kurt started to date a woman named Amanda Sefton, and she turned out to be Jermaine in disguise. Yeah, surprise! Now normally when you find something like this out, you're a little thrown off. I mean, maybe you feel sick to your stomach immediately. I mean, I would assume, I don't know, that's my first reaction. Nightcrawler is totally cool with it. He's like, yeah, for sure. No, I'd be more demonstrative about it, but you know, I don't want to set a bad example for Kitty Pryde, you know? Number 4, Kitty Pryde and Colossus. Age is just a number, I guess. I mean, at least when it comes to X-Men hookups. So when the two first met in X-Men issue 129, she's said to be like 12 or 13 years old. They're trying to recruit her to go to Professor Xavier's school, and Colossus is like 18 or 19, we think, at this time. Now, in the Days of Future Past storyline beginning in X-Men 141, we see Kitty and Colossus married in the future. And that's another thing though, because back to the 14-year-old part, because that's the craziest point that I'm making here, they had their first kiss during a space mission, and right before they kiss, Kitty even says, gee, I wish I was older, and Colossus is like, And then he explains how serious he's being by kissing her. Number 3, Wolverine and Storm. Now, whenever Wolverine is in the picture, you know somebody is getting hurt, whether it's physically or emotionally. So Storm and Wolverine were always flirty, right? They were the cool kids of the X-Men. They didn't exactly get involved in a lot of the drama. Besides, Wolverine was way too into Jean Grey anyways, so his hands were quite full. Now, after a divorce, that's a tricky time to do stuff. I mean, even flirting with a coworker after a divorce, like the X-Men, that would just look worse than anything, right? That's like a no-go. You don't even look that way. The timing is just ill. So Storm divorced Black Panther, and then things got interesting. So Wolverine and Storm ran the Jean Grey school, and they hit it off. Now, the two of them could have gone on to become the best of lovers, but Wolverine lost his healing factor and started becoming reckless. So they decided to be better off friends. You're not immortal? Next. Swipe left. Number 2, Scott Summers and Emma Frost. Cyclops loves the telepathic types, so this exact scenario could get him in quite a pickle. So after Emma became Scott's therapist, feelings came out, you know? Getting in someone's head and all, that's what happens. And I mean literally in their head. Yeah, she used her telepathic powers to enter Scott's mind and help them get through past traumas. So naturally they get pretty close, but of course a bit too close. The affair happened in their minds, which is why this is one of my favorites on the list. Like Jean Grey walked in on them in their minds. Superheroes are wild. Emma Frost pitches the situation pretty well. She's like, no, we'll be in a deep private thought where it's safe to explore these feelings without guilt. Sure, I have a dream where I'm even talking to another girl and I'm like, oh, I gotta tell her. Number 1, Juggernaut and Jen Walters. My favorite for last, you already know what's up. Uncanny X-Men issue 435, we see Juggernaut and he's just kicked Rhino's ass. So he gets locked up, and then here's where things take an interesting turn. He has the perfect chance to get away from this holding facility that he's being held at. So Jen Walters, aka She-Hulk, asks him all these pressing questions. She's like, hey, Kane, why the change of heart? I mean, you're a criminal, and you didn't just break this guy's neck into 7 pieces, and you didn't escape. That's suspicious. She thinks it's part of this master plan, right? I mean, fair, this act of kindness, saving the guard from Rhino and then willingly being detained again. She, of course, thinks it's a lie. Fair, we all kind of agree. And then they start to talk about baseball a bit, just chatting it up, you know, and then the final question comes in. She goes, what do you think about women's rights? And then he goes, and he smiles, and then it cuts to this next page and we get a very messy room after some messy deeds have happened. Yeah, windows are open too, just putting on a show. A very, very loud, very loud show. Kicking off the list at number 10, Black Widow and Tony Stark. Yeah man, I'm starting the list off with a wild one. So in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, they get a little close. Closer than the MCU relationship, that's for sure. So Ultimates issue 3 opens with this shot, and the shot is all of the Ultimates just hanging out in Tony's mansion, and then there's a sex tape playing in the background, and that sex tape being Iron Man and Black Widow. So what's the deal? Why does this exist? Well, in the Ultimates 2, her and Iron Man dated and even got engaged, but it's all lies. Lies, I tell ya. She was trying to destroy the Avengers for the fall of the Soviet Union. That was like her payback. That is, until she's killed by, you guessed it, Hawkeye. Nope, you didn't guess that, because that would be crazy. Imagine if this is how she went out in Avengers Endgame. That scene with her and Hawkeye could have been a bit more wild, and maybe a bit more emotional. Just kidding. That gets me every time. So after she's dead, the tape gets released. People are selling DVDs on the streets about it. Hey, hot dog, no, what about Iron Man and Black Widow bumping uglies? What do you say? New York, New York. I don't know. I like taking risks. I like doing New York accents. Number 9, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Yep, I said what I said. Again, from the Ultimate Universe, Earth 1610 to be specific, the siblings are pretty close, naturally. In Avengers Age of Ultron, the two go from being villains to eventually becoming Avengers by the end of the film. And when Hawkeye said to Wanda, you're an Avenger now, I exhaled loudly. That was awesome. I had my big 3D glasses on. I look like a scuba diver. I'm just sitting there like, yes, awesome. And then Quicksilver died saving Hawkeye. Again, with the goggles. I was like, no, yes, and then no. So change is inevitable and can happen quite fast. The two got a little too close though in the Ultimates. Again, this Ultimate series is quite risque, if I can say that. So sure, this was an alternate version or whatever, but you can't unsee some stuff. In the 3rd issue of the Ultimates, the Wasp is like, man, they sure do love each other. And Cap's like, yeah, of course they do. They're family. Why was he so mad that I commented on her outfit? That's weird. And then the Wasp is like, dude, like he loves her, like, you know, loves her. And then Cap gives the funniest facial expression and goes, but yeah, we all said that, man. We all made the same face, my dude. Number 8, Professor X and Moira McTaggart. So as we saw in the X-Men movies, they're pretty lovey-dovey and they've got a nerdy, cute relationship going. James McAvoy, Rose Byrne, they're unreal actors. It was super enjoyable to watch them. Now, in the movies, he makes her forget a bunch of stuff for good reason, right? It even adds to their dynamic a bit because after, he's obviously still into her and she's like, hey, nice to meet you for the first time ever. Never met this guy before. It's a pretty sad situation, but cute nonetheless. But it could have been way worse. See, in the comics, he at one point straight up abandons Moira and their child to go after his own dreams. Dude's a real go-getter. More like a go leave her. Yeah, I'm really upset. Number 7, Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. What the f? Yeah, you heard me, folks. Beginning in The Amazing Spider-Man number 509, this one is quite odd, to say the least. So Peter gets this letter, right? And the letter that is supposedly from Gwen Stacy, although she's dead. So Peter does a little detective work and runs some DNA tests on the letter. He comes to find out that Gwen Stacy had actually secretly given birth to twins. Mary Jane finally ends up filling Peter in on this dark secret. Gwen Stacy had a secret affair with Norman Osborn 7 months before she died. What's the opposite of air horns? I feel like that's what should be playing loudly right now. Mary Jane even had a conversation with Norman about it. She said she doesn't want Norman to take care of the kids or else they're just gonna turn into another Harry Osborn. Pretty solid line. Norman's exposure to the Green Goblin formula caused these kids to be born early and they came out fully grown. Ouch. Number 6, Deadpool and Siren. Wade Wilson? In love? Sign me up. So, when the unlikely lovers were battling it out with Black Tom Cassidy and Juggernaut, Banshee was like, look girl, he's insane, he's a murderer, he's a madman, I tell ya. Warpath was eyeing her down, but she just couldn't help it but flirt with Wade Wilson. I mean, can you blame her? If I met Ryan Reynolds, I'd probably flirt. I'd be like, hey man, I love Aviation Gin, drink it every morning. What? Siren saw past all of that and she even overlooked his ugly appearance. What a gem. So this is pretty nice and Deadpool likes it. He feels happy almost. Deadpool says over time that she became the voice of reason and sanity in his head. So the two had a deal. She would still see him as long as he behaved. Warpath though, he wasn't a big fan. But who cares? Love is in the air. Number 5, Wolverine and MJ. Ultimate guys, ultimate yet again. So, after Ultimate Spider-Man issue 66, Wolverine is a total creep. Now, that may not come as a total shock, but here are the facts. Wolverine and Spider-Man switched bodies, like the change-up, or I guess Freaky Friday would have been a better example. Mesmero switched their bodies, so Peter was like, hey man, I really need you to go to school. Like, we're 15, we kinda gotta go to school. While Wolverine was in Peter's body, he at one point ended up kissing MJ and even tried to sleep with her. Dude, huh? Yeah, I guess those walks to school with her made him realize how awesome she was. MJ told him she wants to wait until they're older for that kind of thing though. So thank the Lord, nothing like that happened. But there was a kiss. Number 4, Black Widow and the Hulk. This next one is for the fans out there that aren't too heavily into comic books. So in the first Avengers film, we get our first look at Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. This happens moments before the Hulk tries to take out Natasha, aka Black Widow. So that's the first interaction with the pair. That's a pretty rocky start. Even when Nat tries to recruit Banner, he's not too fond of the idea at all, as normal Banner. And then by the time we get to Avengers Age of Ultron, we hear Stark say the words, "You and Banner better not be playing hide the zucchini," to Natasha, which for starters is an amazing line. No idea how that made the final cut of the movie. Secondly, this is a nice confirmation that Banner and Nat are hooking up. You even see some on-screen romance when they're at Hawkeye's secret Farmville house, you know? The most notable part of the relationship is that Natasha can get the Hulk to revert back to Bruce by touching her hands to his. She's like, hey big guy, sun's getting real low. And it works like a charm. And Nat gives her trademark smirk as he cools down in the forest. It's not an easy task to do either. I mean, Thor tried to do it in Thor Ragnarok, but I mean, we all know how that ended up. Number 3, Magneto and the Wasp. We all love Magneto, I mean, it's kinda hard not to. In Secret Wars 1, issue 3, the pair actually have a one-night stand. Ew. So, she even said that Magneto is a great kisser. I mean, look at him, he's got the hair, he seems confident. So here's the kicker, Magneto was apparently drugged. Yeah, it was revealed from Jim Shooter, the guy who wrote the series. He said that Magneto was accidentally drugged, so he was all extra lovey-dovey, and that was of course a factor. So Magneto was head over heels for the Wasp, not really one to hook up and then bounce, you know? Like he actually really liked her. But the Wasp on the other hand was like, yeah dude, that was a one-time thing. Michael Fassbender and Evangeline Lilly, honestly, I'm here for it. She's got the sass and he's got the, well, sad face, so, you know. It would work out. Number 2, Captain America and Sharon Carter. Okay, I have to include this one because when I saw this for the first time in theaters, we all went nuts. So I of course will see movie premieres, like as soon as the movies come out, I'm there, right? Middle row, I got my glasses on, I'm there an hour early. I don't drink water all day, I'm just trying not to go to the washroom. This is it, this is my goal. Because 1, I want to see the movie as soon as possible, and 2, I love hearing other people have the same reaction as me at the same time. So when we meet Sharon Carter and Captain America, America, it's revealed that Peggy Carter was her aunt, and she wasn't just an ordinary neighbor to Steve Rogers. So this dude must love the Carters or something. I mean, he goes from Peggy Carter to her niece, Sharon Carter, and then by the time Endgame rolls around, he goes back in time to the young Peggy Carter. Like, imagine that conversation in Endgame. So, Steve, what have you been up to? I'm looking forward to seeing more of Sharon Carter as Agent 13. Emily Van Camp is an amazing actor, and apparently her character was on the run during Infinity War and Endgame. So I wonder what she was up to. Sneaky. And for number 1, finally, we got Thor and She-Hulk. The strongest couple ever? I think so. It's confirmed in Empire Fallout Fantastic Four #1 that it started off pretty calm and cool, and then the two heroes shared a kiss in the middle of a battlefield, because of course that's where most people end up kissing, and their first date ended up happening in Savage Land. #Savage. So Susan Storm straight up asked Thor if the two of them were a thing, and Shy Thor answered, verily. Also, Shy Thor, how cute. Imagine Chris Hemsworth like, yeah, I don't know, maybe. We could be, who knows, what's it to you? I don't know how to do Chris Hemsworth voice. I mean, the guy must have 2 hammers. People think that in the MCU, Thor and Captain Marvel will end up together, solely off that one look that they gave each other in Endgame. But my argument is that during that scene, you can slightly hear the words, I have telepathy. It's like, I have telepathy. Pretty on point. But it's in Brie Larson's voice, obviously, I can't do that voice. So I'm assuming the two of them had a quick conversation or shared some type of knowledge between each other, either off screen or in their head. What do you guys think? Who's the perfect other half for the God of Thunder? Is it Jennifer Walters or Carol Danvers? You already know my vote, I don't know.
In at number 10, we have Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor. They are a classic couple from the golden age of comics. They're iconic at this point, and the Wonder Woman movie definitely helped with that. Now you may be saying that Diana is a god and Steve Trevor is just a dude. Admittedly a Chris Piney dude, but still just a dude. He has been a secret agent. That's happened in a couple of continuities as well. Well, he's more than that. In a way, he's a bridge between their worlds, because Diana becomes an ambassador between the human and the Themysciran world, and this relationship helps with that. In many ways, their relationship becomes a symbol of cooperation and coexistence. There's also always a little bit of being impressed that Steve can hold her interest, and with her godlike strength and his ability to mobilize mass units of people, admittedly a bit more when he's a secret agent, they can also be a force to be reckoned with. Still, their staying power, what they represent, is what makes them a little bit of a power couple. Number 9, the Vision and Scarlet Witch. Now, the Vision and Scarlet Witch are another iconic couple with a fascinating history, which even has the fact that the writers that were writing their comic book series, the one of them together, didn't actually enjoy it because they didn't like the relationship. Also, a lot of really awful stuff happened while these two were together. It's not all sunshine and lollipops, and definitely not rainbows. And yet it stood out. These two together are definitely a force. The Scarlet Witch was one of the most powerful mutants in existence pre-retcon. Now she's one of the most powerful mutates and witches in the Marvel Universe. This is thanks to the whole Magneto is not my dad, because we need to have horizontal synergy between the MCU and Marvel Comics. But back to Wanda. She can literally warp reality, and she has. It's how she initially made their kids. Again, pre-many retcons. The Vision is a synthezoid modeled after Ultron, with the frame of the original Human Torch, Jim Hammond. He too is powerful, terrifyingly so, able to shift densities, utilize super strength, fly, and so much more. This is one couple you definitely do not want to mess with, and yet people do. Number 8, Black Bolt and Medusa. The Inhumans are much more than the failed show. Much, much more. There was an Inhumans push for a bit when the X-Men were out of favor. It was like, they're kind of like the X-Men, let's talk about them. Black Bolt is the leader of the Inhumans, and Medusa is his queen. Black Bolt possesses a devastating ability. If he speaks, he can wreak havoc because he just produces these powerful vibrations from his vocal cords. It's why he has that, what some people call a silly design on top of his mask. It's actually a tuning fork to help him direct it. Because of this, Medusa has to do the speaking for him. Oh, also she's his distant cousin, just fun fact. Look, with royal lineage, you gotta do what you gotta do. Medusa's powers are, as her name would suggest, localized in her hair. Each strand has its own powerful, individualized strength, and she can control it as if it were an appendage, or a limb, many, many limbs. These two are the rulers of the Inhumans. and they wield all the power that comes with that. Number 7, Rogue and Magneto. That's right, Rogue and Magneto, not Rogue and Gambit. Rogue and Magneto is like the other Rogue pairing, much to some people's distress. They would first hook up in the Savage Land. This was in main continuity, and powers get a bit wonky in the Savage Land, so things can happen, like hooking up with mutants who normally can't touch people. In the now famed Age of Apocalypse alternate universe storyline, these two were together. His powers would somehow cancel hers out. Just go with it. It would allow them to touch and conceive children. Magneto is the master of magnetism, whose powers vary wildly. From him being able to control metal, to rip the iron out of your blood, to actually change the magnetic pull of the Earth's poles. That sounds like I said magnetic. Magnetic, you know what I'm saying. It really depends who's writing him. Rogue can absorb the powers of almost any mutant, and if she holds on long enough, the transfer is permanent, like what happened with Ms. Marvel. That's why she can fly and why she has super strength. Together, as I've said many times and will say again, the two are a force to be reckoned with. Not to mention with Rogue's villainous past, she sometimes lets to bend the rules a little bit. Number 6, Reed Richards and Sue Storm. Your relationship doesn't have to be the best for you to be a strong couple, like in terms of influence and taking people down. Although Reed and Sue have some kind of arrangement going on, they have to. He neglects her so much, or he did before he saw them all die in front of him. Reed and Sue are both members of Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four, both altered by the cosmic rays that hit them in space. Reed would become Mr. Fantastic with amazing stretching abilities, or fantastic dare I say. And Sue would at first be able to become invisible, but over time her power set would be amplified and you would be able to add force fields and pushing and tugging and a whole bunch of other things that have actually expanded her to, in some people's minds, being the most powerful member of the team, or at least the most versatile. These two hold the keys to some of the most powerful items within the Marvel Universe, like the Ultimate Nullifier. And they are parents of two of the strongest and smartest next generation heroes. They're definitely not a couple you'd want to take on. Number 5, Beta Ray Bill and Sif. Beta Ray Bill first debuted in the Mighty Thor number 337 and was part of a new era of Thor that began with writer Walter Simonson. He was a character who was designed to shake things up. He was supposed to be horrifying looking and also be able to wield the hammer of Thor, which was supposed to raise the question of, oh, how is this possible? For how is he worthy? Over time, Beta Ray Bill would become a part of Thor's mythos, like so many people who started off as rivals or fighting Thor. That's how Thor makes a lot of friends. And Beta Ray would find himself forming an attachment to Sif, the warrior goddess, who was once a love interest for Thor herself. Her with the powers of the Norse gods, and him with the ability to wield Thor's hammer. Both from other realms, beyond what mortals can conceive. They may seem like an odd pair, but they're definitely a strong one. Number 4, Aquaman and Mera. Aquaman is the king of Atlantis, with the power to control sea creatures and also domain over most of the earth. He can manipulate water as well, and he has some enhanced Atlantean physiology. Well, half Atlantean. His queen Mera, who is not only fully Atlantean, has over the years shown some abilities of her own. She has shown to be just as powerful and capable as her husband, and also has magical abilities. So the two together are a substantial threat, despite people thinking that Aquaman is lame. I wouldn't want to fight Aquaman. These two could conquer the whole planet if they really wanted to. It's a good thing that tends to only happen in Elseworld stories and alternate timelines. Number 3, the Midnighter and Apollo. The Midnighter and Apollo come from Wildstorm Comics, which would eventually be absorbed by DC. These two are meant to be pastiches of Batman and Superman respectively. They are also a couple in an ode to Superbat, which is the very popular fan pairing of Superman and Batman. Shipping is a thing, it's just another way that fans enjoy fandom. There are many ways to do it, and there is no right or wrong way or better or worse way. Any fan can be an amazing fan who helps and raises up the fandom, or can be a bad one that makes it look bad. Doesn't matter where you're from. Respect the fandom and others rather than tearing it down. There are enough people on the outside doing that, we don't need to do it from the inside too. The Midnighter is bioengineered and has superhuman strength and reflexes, and the ability to withstand certain psionic attacks, while Apollo has the powers of, well, Superman. Together these two and their rather more anti-hero approach to superheroing hold quite the grip over their planet, the Wildstorm universe. Or they did before they were broken up so that the Midnighter could flirt with Nightwing, and because no marriage, said Dan Didio, the head of DC at the time. Number 2, Storm and Black Panther. Storm and Black Panther are an iconic couple. She is essentially a goddess, and with him she is an African queen, for he is the king of Wakanda, and he also comes with all the technology and influence that brings with it. They are quite literally a world unto themselves. capable of either intense influence or total seclusion. It depends upon their whims. Most absolutely adore this pairing and are hoping to see it on the big screen at some point, but that's probably going to take a while because not only of what's happening at the time of this recording, but the actress is making comments about how she was there first, Storm that is, and that's not true. It was a whole thing. We may have to wait for an alternate universe. We'll see if it happens, but either way, adaptation is not the be all end all. You'll always have Storm and Black Panther in the comics. And finally, in at number 1, Wonder Woman and Superman. It was a toss-up for these two spots, to be honest. It could have gone either way. Superman and Wonder Woman are a couple so obvious that for a time at DC they were actually made fun of a little bit because it was too obvious, like a cheerleader and a jock. They were even labeled as fanficky in some corners. But then the New 52 happened and they made it a reality. Wonder Woman was an Amazonian princess and a god, and Superman was an alien with godlike abilities. This was coming from Krypton due to the change of the sun. We all know what happened. The New 52 presented characterizations that were different from the norm. Instead of feeling drawn to humanity and embracing it because of their abilities, they instead felt alienated by them and othered. They were set apart by their powers, and so they were drawn together because of this. Drawn to individuals who didn't judge them for their otherness, and with whom they didn't have to hold back, which ventures pretty close to that woman of tissue paper argument that some people have for Lois Lane.